Let's give you another cheerful story. Following a school year filled with ups and downs, Bryanston High in Johannesburg is one of the schools which managed to conquer and impress with a 100% pass rate for the class of 2021. Acting Principal Jerome Lawrence joins us now in the studio to tell us about their journey. Jerome, I must say, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
for Bryanston High to actually score 100% pass. I guess the million-dollar question is, how did you do it?
I think the secret was proper planning, and we were lucky enough to have a cooperative class of 2021 together with their parents who understood the reality that they had been through 2020, which in itself was a horrendous year for them from an academic point of view. And if they wanted in any way to achieve, to be successful in their final matric results, we needed their cooperation. And I think it was a combination of planning and cooperation on the part of the kids.
Well, they've certainly come to the party,
right? They have indeed.
Yeah, I mean, when you're speaking about even some of the realities that the young people have had to contend with, many would say that young people, during a COVID-19 pandemic, what we've seen be a topic of conversation is mental health and the state of the mental health of the young learner, because they have to now take in information at a completely different climate. How are you guys just navigating the effects of the pandemic and the mental health effects that it's got on the learners?
Okay, we were very lucky in that we've always had a resident school psychologist, and during the pandemic we actually employed the services of a second psychologist. So in that respect, the kids had access to counseling, they had access to assistance, not just with their mental health, but also just helping them with study skills and coping with the situation. So we were lucky in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, you referred to how you had to have a conversation with the parents as well so that they can come to the party. I'm just thinking of those schools that did not manage to score 100% and those schools that were doing a little bit poorly in terms of just their matric results. How important is it to get the buy-in of the parents, and how do the parents come to the party effectively for their kids?
Look, it's critical. It's critical. You're not always going to get 100% buy-in, but proper communication, making the parents understand that the situation as it is and how dire it is, and the time limits that we have, the difficulties of online teaching. So it was just about communicating with the parents and keeping them informed as to what was going on. We had planned already at the end of 2021, just in case things went wrong. And I mean, we were proven correct when the minister delayed the opening of schools. But we had already in advance sent letters out to parents indicating that even if there was a delay, we would immediately go online so as not to miss time. So that kind of communication gave us a bit of the cooperation that we wanted.
So from what I'm getting, a lot of forward planning is needed.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're going to navigate the weather and the uncertainty of this kind of COVID-19 pandemic. Just how forward planning is forward planning, really?
Yeah, look, for us, once we go into our final exams, the final exams for the entire school, including the matrics, and we are no longer in the class teaching, we then have a series of meetings where subject heads, different subjects meet, eventually culminating in what we call a strategic planning meeting. It's at that meeting where we plan for the next year. So in our planning at the end of 2020, we planned for a scenario A, a scenario B, a scenario C.
Gotcha.
So we planned as if things would go back to normal. We planned as if we would not be able to go back to normal. We planned for rotational. So as I say, when the minister announced that we wouldn't be going back on time, we just reverted to plan B, which we had already planned for. So, yeah.
Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C. I see how you got the 100% pass rate, I can imagine. But, you know, as you're speaking about this, because Bryanston High is a former Model C school, right? Because many people will be saying, but you guys are in private school, so you've got the resources galore. But that's not the case. You've got kids that come from disadvantaged households.
Absolutely.
And I mean, you're saying that you went into online learning. I'm thinking for a household which, and you and I know the discrepancies as well as the inequalities that exist. When the kids say, I don't have access to the online learning mechanisms and tools, how did you guys then come to the party to assist those kids that have to get laptops, that have to get Wi-Fi?
Plan C. Yeah, so what we did, we did consider that, and it wasn't only kids who don't have the laptop or the iPad. If you're in a household where you've got 3 kids in different grades and 1 device, it becomes difficult if they're all having lessons at the same time. So the solution was to record the lessons, so that even if the kid couldn't be online immediately, when the brother or the other sibling was done with the device, they could then access the recorded lesson.
Got you.
We also, in our timetable when the kids were back, introduced what was called an extension lesson, because the kids have access to free Wi-Fi at school, even if they couldn't connect at home, when eventually they came back to school, they could connect and watch those recorded lessons. So they then did have access to them at school using the free Wi-Fi that the school provides.
You see, but that also takes and speaks a lot to accountability on behalf of the learner. So the learner must want to stay at school until maybe 5 o'clock so they can make use of the free Wi-Fi as well as the resources available to the school. But it also says something about the teachers. Because in order for you to record yourself teaching a class, it requires extra amount of dedication, extra amount of time spent. And maybe many people would go to and say, hold on a second, were these parents and these teachers paid overtime? Were the teachers paid overtime in order for them to record some of the lessons and go into the over and above mechanism of teaching?
No, not at all. And the added problem to that is, I mean, dinosaurs like myself who've been in this business so long, we're not as tech savvy as the rest. So having been caught a bit off guard in 2020, you know, not knowing how to do this online thing, we simply just used the younger, more tech-savvy staff to train those of us who weren't familiar with things like Microsoft Teams, etc., to enable us to use the platform as effectively as possible and then obviously make it available to the kids. There was no overtime pay for the teachers. They gave freely of their time, and I think credit to them and the cooperation of the kids that we ended up where we are.
Well, in 30 seconds, if you've got a principal right now that's listening to this conversation between the two of us and is hiding underneath the bed saying, oh no, you don't want to see how my school fared, what advice would you give to a principal who's struggling to get even past a certain threshold where they could be considered good results for Matric?
I think number one is don't give up. Always assume you can achieve the best possible results, and communication is vital. You've got to get the buy-in of your parents and your kids. I think teaching the content and the rest doesn't matter if you don't have their buy-in. You've got to somehow or the other get first your learners, then their parents to understand how important this is. That unfortunately in this country, if you don't have that Matric certificate and that university qualification, it's almost impossible to get anywhere. So communicate with your stakeholders.
Communicate and get the buy-in. Jerome, congratulations once again. You get to have a little bit of a free time. Well, not so much because you've got kids that are back to school now, so it starts all over again for you. The cycle of communication continues there for Jerome. But of course, Jerome Lawrence there, acting principal of Bryanston High School, having